Hi, everyone. Welcome to the fourth episode of Conceptualism. Today, I have with me Professor Hans-Ola Ericsson, who is an organist, a pedagogue, and a composer. He's worked on many incredible projects throughout the world, and it's a pleasure to have you here with us, Professor.
Nice to talk to you. It will be nice to talk to you. I know that already.
Well, so I guess I want to start by asking you, about a project that you were involved in, which involved ice, and that would be the organ that was made out of ice.
Yeah, that was a very special project. It's a very long time ago now. It was in the small village of Jukkasjärvi outside Kiruna in the very north of Sweden.
Uh-huh.
And there was this instrument maker. Now, what was his name? Sorry, slipped my mind, but I'm sure you can find out.
Yeah.
He was building instruments out of ice, like drums, guitars. He built a cello. He built some flutes, and then he asked me, "So couldn't we build an organ?" And I said, "Sure, we should be able to build an organ." And he spent a lot of time in casting pipes with water, so making in ice, and different sizes. And I put him together with an organ manufacturing company in Sweden, Grönlund's organ building company, and he designed this ice organ, and I helped him, and I was assisting him, and I inaugurated it. But it took so long time for him to build that we were already then in April, and the whole large complex of igloos, which was built in Jukkasjärvi, the ice hotel, was starting to melt. And as I was playing, I could see that the pipes sort of were dripping, and there was a team from a really big, it could have been BBC, that came extra to this inauguration.
Uh-huh.
But the instrument maker, he refused them to enter the concert hall. So they had to go back to London without having filmed 1 second, because, as I said, the instrument was melting. And I was sitting there playing, and I was improvising, all over the place. It was 2 manuals, so 2 different 8-foot stops. And it was very nice sound, actually. But of course, it was getting out of tune, as coming up to me asking, "Couldn't you play something by Bach or so?" And I said, "No, you don't want me to play anything by Bach, because it would not sound very satisfying." I'm sorry. You should have prepared me for this question. Of course, I would have. Tim Linnard, I think it was his name.
Right.
If I would have known that in advance, I would, of course, had checked that up. But he's a very, very dedicated person into ice instruments and loved shaping instruments in ice. So
that's incredible. That's just, yeah, that's amazing. And in fact, I think I'm pretty sure there's an organ somewhere in the U.S. which has glass pipes or crystal pipes. And
yeah, that could very well be. I mean, yeah, we were discussing an outdoor organ also in the north of Scandinavia, and we wanted to do the pipes in composite. So this modern material that you build airplanes with and
right.
other stuff,
Right.
And that also went fairly far, that project. But then there was a huge election, and the politicians didn't support it because they were afraid what it would do with their support, you know, going with something as crazy as an organ for outside, you know. Yeah.
Have you had the opportunity to play any of the outdoor organs, like the one at Balboa Park, or you know, there's one um, in Europe as well?
In Austria, the Heldenorgel,
Yeah.
the yeah. No, I haven't played them. I've seen the one in Austria, but I didn't play it. No, no. But of course, this instrument never really worked properly. It was built in an era where but of course there are instruments in the United States that are for outdoor, also in San Diego and places like that. I haven't played them, but I hear good things about them. My friend Gunnar Idenstam, he played a concert there a year ago. And also my former student, Alcy Chris,
Yeah.
he also played some of those instruments. And
Right.
it's of course meeting another audience, you know.
Mm.
I mean, the main organs are basically in churches and or in concert halls.
Right. So there's that distinction between the church organ and then the civic organ.
Yeah, mind you, they're all being built with the same kind of ideas. So I'm involved now in an organ for the concert hall in Gothenburg in Sweden,
right.
which will be built by Rieger Organ Company from Austria, one
Yes.
of the leading organ builders in the world today.
Yeah.
And this will be an organ that is basically representing the style by Cavaillé-Coll, the French
Yes.
romantic organ builder, with some additional romantic American features.
Right. Right. And
of course, and some wind supply manipulation possibilities, because they have done some marvelous development, the Rieger company, in an instrument in Kassel, in St. Martin in Kassel, where you can work with lowering the wind pressure and also raising the wind pressure.
Right.
So you can play with too high a wind pressure and very, very detailed with low wind pressure as well. I mean, it still needs to be perfected. But in an organ which I have been the main consultant for in Malmö, in the south of Sweden. So Malmö is very close to Copenhagen, the capital of Denmark. St. Petri Church, Kleis Organ Company has done an amazing instrument which combines, there is a new choir organ, and it's built like a tower. I think it's 13 meters high. It's very, very thin. Okay. And in 3 stairs, you know, the pipes are placed, and it's also combined with the central organ of the church, an organ of 4 manuals by Markussen, the Danish organ builder from the 1940s or beginning of the 50s. And these 2 instruments can be combined and on a 6 manual keyboard. And also then on this choir organ, you can do quite amazing reductions of wind supply and also manage to control it perfectly.
So what's the mechanism?
So it's
what's the mechanism?
That's one of the.
What's the mechanism that allows you to control that? Is it like a pedal or is it like a switch, or what how do you control it?
Yeah, in this case it's like a swell shoe.
Okay.
So you can reduce the wind by pressing the shoe, and you can play with that. So from 0 to 100.
Wow.
So yeah, it's quite remarkable craftsmanship from the organ builder to do this, and to do it so that you every time can get the same effect from the pipes. And that's of course what we want to control as composers.
Yes.
When we are improvising, it's not so vital, but as composers, we need to be able to control it much more. And then also, of course, with a faster than MIDI, so like open sound control, we can do much more detailed programming of the organ and programming of different in different kinds of fields,
And there's another organ that you've worked on that I read about, which you said has the possibility to be played with a remote keyboard, and that to me is quite remarkable, and also just makes total sense,
yeah.
And
I mean, any keyboard that you can, where you have MIDI, you can play remotely, obviously.
Right.
So my dear friend Randall Harlow has, of course, developed this and wants to make it like a network around the globe. So so that you should be able to play on the instruments across the world, and also to compose for different instruments. So if they speak the same language, the organs, in this case MIDI, it doesn't really matter where it is. You have to work on latency. That's the thing. Yeah.
Right. And I mean, would the MIDI also be able to control the stops? Like would you be able to select stops virtually?
Sure.
Like let's
Absolutely.
say you would have like a graphic user interface which would then have all the stops, and you can select the stops, and then in real time those stops would be activated.
Absolutely. So yeah. So you see, if we go back to the development from after the Second World War, where of course in Europe this was hour zero. I mean, most of the culture was destroyed. Like in Germany, most of the churches were destroyed, and they needed to rebuild a lot of instruments in a very short time.
Mm-hmm.
And at this time, of course, the organ movement, so building instruments with a Baroque idea, or what they thought was a Baroque idea, very clear principles, very simple, basically, was built hundreds, thousands of instruments. But of course, these instruments, the neoclassical instruments, they had, of course, a limited possibilities of expression. Whereas in France, where most churches were unharmed, you had the heritage of Cavaillé, and of course, many musicians went to France to sort of hear the original sound. And then in smaller villages in Germany, there were still original instruments that just needed a rather quick fix, or a very, very costly renovation or restoration. And that has taken basically up till now. Most instruments now are restored or reconstructed of the great early Baroque period, the Abschnittger or the Silbermann in the central Germany, or Abschnittger in the north of Germany. Because, you see, we never had top organ builders interested in doing something new. So first of all, in the 20th century, first of all, it was to sort of restore, to have instruments, built on a classical principle. And then to develop the instrument into something what it is today took a very long time. When I was young and I went to conferences, I was declared crazy. And the organ builder said, no, don't listen to that bloke Ericsson. His ideas, they're just, we don't want to deal with that.
Well,
And the
you now
interesting
you've shown
thing,
them. Now you've really shown them, because like everybody wants you to consult on their organ.
there you go. So I've said that also publicly, you know, it's interesting. I have not changed my mind, but now the best organ builders in the world want to hear these thoughts. You
Right.
see, yeah. So this has been a very interesting development. Mind you, some of those Baroque organs and some of the original instruments, that's the sort of amazing color we want as musicians, as composers, as organists, to be able to get close to a sensual sound and a super interesting sound where we can sort of move emotions and get ideas. So we need the best kind of instruments, the best kind of material.
Yes.
Best trackers, best technique, you know.
Yeah.
So when we talk about ice organs, or we talk about spectacular ideas where you can play an organ in Yokohama and I can sit here in Montreal and basically play it now, that's of course only the icing of the cake.
Right. Right.
But we need the substance, the sound, the building, you know. We need the best organ builders to do that, and to be able
that's
to
the foundation. That's the foundation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also, you know, sometimes I've been asked, so what is the most fantastic organ you've ever played? And of course, you know, we get these kind of questions.
Yes.
And I say one of the most amazing organs I played is the small one manual organ of the little village of Utum in the north of Germany. I think it has 7 stops. But each pipe is like a revelation. Each sound of each pipe, and you know, if you start bringing 2 stops together, it's like a universe of possibilities. So it's not really only about having everything that you can dream about. It's also having the mystery of sound, and the mystery of air's wind supply, and the touch of the keys.
Right, like that makes me think about, you know, when the chiff of the pipe, or you know, being able to control the exact way that it speaks, like,
Yeah.
and that depends on how sensitive the keyboard is or how good the tracker is, you know.
Absolutely.
And that you sometimes lose that when you play on a electro-pneumatic console, or a console that doesn't have that touch.
That's it. I mean, there are other advantages with electro-pneumatic organs, you know, like you can effortlessly play very virtuosic things.
That's right, yes.
You can do that on trackers also, but of course it takes another technique, and other muscles are at play,
Yes.
or activities are at play. So, but the pure tracker from key to the pipe, you know, that you can control, you can open the valve as slow as you want, basically. And that's also very, very interesting, you know, to be able to do that. And we can do this with the help of wind supply today. So let's say if I only have 5% of the wind to a pipe, you know,
Yes.
I can basically press down a chord and you hear nothing. And then when I release and I only have 1 or 2 notes left, I have a very, very soft wind to the pipe, and it just touches it very, very delicately. So I find the idea of wind supply is what drives me, you know, so much, and I've learned so much from the antique organs.
And I mean, there's also, you know, the possibility of combining electronic or computers with tracker. Like, for example, the Beckerath organ, you know, at St. Joseph's, all the stops are electronic, but the keyboards themselves are tracker.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know,
Absolutely, yeah.
so in that sense, there are very interesting marriages which can happen, and
Absolutely.
another interesting marriage is also the the combination of say like hybrid organs, so digital with pipes. And a lot of purists will say, oh, but the digital isn't the same as the pipe. But let's say you're in a small church and you can't afford to have a 32-foot pipe in the space, but you have a digital replication of a 32-foot pipe. Then that's your best alternative, I guess.
It could be. It depends on the room, of course, because also
Because the room is also the instrument.
it's a question of frequencies, because if the room is large enough for a 32-foot pipe sound, it's the same thing with coming from speakers, actually.
Right.
But there are hybrid organs being built also when combining different organs, and I think that the Orgelpark in Amsterdam is the most interesting place in the world today, because it combines many different kind of instruments. For example, a Sauer organ, two-manual Sauer organ is based on 3 manuals, and a two-manual Baroque organ, newly built, reconstructed. But you can play both organs from a digital console.
Right.
Where, of course, then this opens an entirely new world. And you don't even have to play on the keyboards. You can bring your own digital instruments.
Yeah.
And there are some amazing compositions being made by young Dutch composers on this instrument in Amsterdam. And of course now, since the pandemic closed everything, I also think that the Orgelpark is closed. But it is there, and it is such a wonderful place to come and work and to have seminars, discussions, and the aesthetical view is sky high. Everything is possible to discuss, and there are terrific people, and so there are a lot of centers now around the globe, actually, where super interesting things are happening. Yeah.
Well, there's an organ that I saw, and I'm forgetting where it is and what the name of the organ is, but it has the ability to play microtones. It has a keyboard which allows you to play microtonally, and it also has like you said, this wind supply thing, but also you can half draw stops, or a quarter draw stop, or 3/4 draw stop, and the computer is able to remember these things. So let's say if you want a registration where all the stops are pulled out to different lengths and the wind supplies at a certain, and then you play on the microtonal keyboard, you can do things that are really interesting. Like you can play Indian music on a pipe organ, which in the past would have been virtually impossible.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually developed something like this together with an organ builder already 25 years ago, to have trackers, so each stop could be pulled in 128 steps.
Wow.
And you put a fully mechanical stop action, but you could save each combination. So if you had 40 stops, each stop could have its own perfectly chosen length of the opening of the wind, you see.
Right.
So 128 steps. So, and this has been done on a number of organs where I have been a consultant, also in the north of Sweden. In Malmö you can do it, and I think also not in Amsterdam, but there are very, very beautiful things that you can do.
And what about organs that sort of combine instruments that are not pipes, basically? So of course the classic example would be a theater organ, but even a theater organ. Hi.
Okay.
I think we lost the connection there for a second.
Yeah, but now we're good again.
Yes, we're good. Okay, so now my question was, organs that combine, whether it's a trap instrument like snare drum or cymbals or whatever, and pianos and all kinds of other things that you can play with an organ, so like a theater organ. But what if you were including instruments that have never even been considered part of the organ, like let's say a hammered dulcimer or a sitar or a theremin, for example. Like what if you could control the organ with some sort of like field where you would move your hand around and that would control the sound, or even like there's this woman that I interviewed. Her name is Angie Coombs, and she was playing a synthesizer with her mind. She's
Yeah,
using a brainwave reader to control a synthesizer. So
yeah,
imagine that technology being applied to the organ, where you could actually think of something and the organ would react.
yeah. This is wonderful. I love that. You know, you can basically do this in at the Orgelpark in Amsterdam. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So that's a place for you to visit.
That's amazing. And speaking of your student Alcy Chris, he played a transcription of Art Tatum on the pipe organ,
Yeah.
and so I guess that leads to certain. Sorry about that. That was an interruption from my family. So I was saying, what would be the challenges of transcribing jazz onto the pipe organ? Like, and you obviously worked with him on that. So
Yeah.
so how did you guys manage to transfer that?
Yeah, it was basically Alci's work because he grew up in the Baptist church. For him, jazz was his first musical language.
Right.
And obviously, this is something that you have to have in your blood uh, before you can actually make a credible transcription of anything.
Right.
And he said to me, "Why should I do this? I'm a black musician. Isn't it dumb? I mean, should I be doing this?" And I said, "Yes, you should be doing this because this is your music. And when you represent your own music, it can never be wrong. It will always be true."
Yeah.
And then, of course, to get all the licks of Art Tatum, that takes a long time to get in your fingers because he was, of course, an incredible pianist. Huh?
Technician. Yeah. I mean, he could do things on the piano that would make even the most proficient pianist look like an amateur.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know and I
exactly.
think it was famously, I think it was Fats Waller that said, I play the piano tonight, God is in the house, something like this.
Yeah.
you know so
Yeah, there you go. So it was a pure delight to work with Alcy on this and to get a good transcription put together. But the work was his.
right.
I was the person that sort of inspired him to continue and to not reject where he came from. And I think that this is one of the great skills with this young organist. He can do anything, but he has a heritage, and when you let the culture of your heritage come through, it will always be touching. It will always be filled with heart, emotion, and it's just to listen and be amazed.
And it's continuing a living tradition.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Mhm.
So speaking about jazz and improvisation, I guess I've always been fascinated by the French tradition of improvising. You know,
Mhm.
and I mean, I've listened to improvisations by people like Daniel Roth and Olivier Latry, on like the Saint-Sulpice organ and Notre Dame organ, and some like, I mean, some of the stuff that they play, some of the vocabulary that they use is is well, it's very complex and very challenging to the ear, because of their use of dissonance, which I find really fascinating. So I wonder if you have any insight into their use of dissonance and how they use it in such ways that it takes you on a certain trajectory, on a certain journey, which you wouldn't be able to do with just consonants in an improvisation.
This is, of course, the strong school of French improvisation. We have has been for centuries, of course, and Marcel Dupré, he wrote it down how you should go ahead, how you should learn improvisation, and also learn how to improvise fugues and contrapoint, and also to imitate other composers. Of course, there's a lot of imitation going on. You play in the style of, you play in the style of this or that, or you combine styles. Mm-hmm. And I would say there are improvisers that are quite amazing. Olivier is a good friend of mine. He's, of course, stunning. There are many stunning improvisers. Jean Guillou, which was a good friend of mine also, I felt that his improvisations were quite amazing. But, you know, here we border into something else. We border into the improvising composer.
Right.
And this is where we also find the improvisations by Olivier Messiaen.
Who you studied with.
Yeah. Highly interesting, because he used the organ as a tool for composition. So very often, of course, he could also play an apocalyptic postlude, or, you know, an apocalyptic prelude or whatever, picturing the day of the church year. But when he was working as a composer at the organ, he actually tried out compositional ideas. And there are hundreds of books of his manuscripts from his experiments with improvisation.
Yeah, that's amazing. And wasn't he very inspired by birdsong? He used the sound of birds in his compositions.
Yeah, I mean, he himself declared himself as, first of all, ornithologist.
Right.
Secondly, as rhythm writer, and thirdly, as composer of music. And that, of course, says a lot about how he appreciated the importance of what he was doing. Now you froze again.
I'm back. I think I'm back. Can you hear me? Hello?
You're sharing your yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, great. Okay. So no,
so in any case, the improvisation. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sorry. No, I was just saying.
No, but
go ahead.
No, I just wanted to make a distinction between improvising composers, or composing improvisers, and improvisers. This is, of course, a huge difference.
Absolutely. Well, you know, and I'm so happy that you made that distinction, because I think of myself as a, you know, as an improvising composer, or as somebody that's interested in spontaneous composition. So, mm-hmm. You know, and a lot of people will say, oh, but you're just improvising, you're not a composer, or you know, or that if you're making it up on the spot, it's not as valid as composition. You know, but I think of course, you know, Messiaen was completely shattered that idea, because he proved that you are a composer, you know, when you improvise, and that spontaneous composition is just as valid a form of composition as any other.
I mean, what he did was that he planned everything so carefully. So also his best improvisations were planned. You know, he had sketches. He knew exactly what to do and when to do what, and it was he worked on an improvisation exactly as a composition.
Right, right. And you've
So
also
spontaneous.
sorry, I think
Please.
because of the lag, we're sometimes talking over each other. Um, I was going to ask you about you've worked with John Cage and Ligeti and some of these other composers, and how was that experience for you? And also, what do you think about that composition, As Slow as Possible, the 639-year organ composition?
I was one of the initiators behind that project
Of course
in
you were.
Halberstadt in Germany. Yeah. No, I cannot keep myself calm when there are interesting ideas happening. Now, I mean, to work with Ligeti and was amazing. He was very, very precise, very extremely demanding what he wanted. And John Cage was wonderful. I worked with him in Darmstadt in 1990 and performed his piece, Some of the Harmony of Maine, for organ and 6 registrants or 6 assistants. And it was a wonderful collaboration. He's a very, very friendly and wonderful man, and very, very modest. And I remember we did it in a church, a Pauluskirche in Darmstadt, and he came there with his entourage, and the super interesting. It was rather aggressive, so I felt I had to do something. So I opened all of the wind chests just a little bit, so there was a big sort of white noise, or not a big white noise, but there was a white noise in the whole room then, you know. So because I had all of the wind chests a little bit open, and by this, of course, feeding each registration with a little bit less wind. And I brought John Cage into the organ to explain how the sound was done, and he looked at me and said, "Oh, I like the sound, thank you." So he was very, very friendly and forthcoming. Yeah. Mm.
Well, and I think your piece, Four Beasts, Amen. You have a section where you're focusing on the sound of the wind chest.
Yeah, the Kyrie. I did a lot of recordings on the Schnitger original organs with microphones inside the organ, inside the wind chests. So it's that piece is like if you go with a small microscope inside the organ and sort of with huge ears and listen to all the noises that is produced, because you know that's also when we listen to a pipe, an antique pipe very often has a high noise factor. So the speech just between 2 different pipes can be completely different and different kind of noise. And of course, the richer the noise factor is and more detailed, the richer the whole effect will also be. And this is one thing that for the organ project in Gothenburg, for the Caricol project there with Rieger, we work a lot on getting the right degree of noise from the pipes, you know, because if you don't have noise, it gets too sterile. It's right. too perfect, you know.
Right, like a perfect sine wave is hardly interesting.
No, you know? There you go.
And I guess the other question I have is about spacing, like, you know, the way that the pipes are set up, like, you know, like and also, like, you know, if you have a wind chest and you have pipes in different locations, like let's say you have you know, a gallery organ, and then you have an organ in another loft, and you know, so like you have the space between the pipes, and as the organist you somehow have to play it in sync. Like you have to make sure that the sound, even if it's very far away, is reaching, well, you have to play without listening, I guess, is what I'm trying to ask. Like it, like, or you have to play without taking into, I don't know how to articulate the question.
Yeah,
Basically, you get what I'm saying. It's like,
I
how do you,
think I think I know what you're saying. I can give you one reply on that complex.
yeah.
When it comes to where the organist sits at the organ, it's probably the worst place to listen to the instrument, you know, because if you're out in the room, everything comes together at one point.
Yes.
So in all the CDs I have recorded, be it of music, the complete works by Messiaen or a lot of Bach CDs or whatever, I always record with headphones. So I always hear the recorded sound, not what I think might be the recorded sound. No, I hear the recorded sound all the time.
Yeah.
So I hear the acoustic, and I hear the effect of each sound.
Yeah.
So that is very complex. Sometimes it's fun also to experiment and not 100% know what's happening, you know,
Mm.
work with that also. But I in this aspect, I'm a bit of a control freak. So I really want to hear, you know. I remember when I was young, when I was around 20, 25, my dream was, because already then, and that's a long time ago, I had seen this Kunstkopf, artificial head microphones, you know, and I heard recordings made by this artificial head microphone, and when you listen with the headphones, you got exactly the sound, you know.
Right. So
And I
almost,
want I wanted
would it
to
be
have,
comparable? Would it be comparable to a binaural recording?
yeah, probably, yeah. So in any case, my dream already back then, so some 35, 37 years ago, was to have a Kunstkopf every time I played, and to place it down in the best position, play with headphones, and be able to hear what other people were hearing.
That's amazing, because that removes the dichotomy between the player and the audience,
Yeah,
because you're hearing what the audience is hearing.
yeah, and that should be, you know, that's a dream scenario, of course. Of course, there are other things, you know, when you're close to an instrument, when you're sitting, you hear the imperfections perhaps more.
Mm-hmm.
But most of the time, and that can be very, very stimulating artistically, but most of the time, you really also want to hear, what am I feeding to the listener? Because if you don't know what you're feeding to the listener, you are on a very thin ice.
Right.
And this is why I want to, where I feel perhaps I'm a bit of a control freak there.
And then, you know, there's also the sounds that are made, like when you actually press the keys, like with the mechanical console. Like, you know, when you're it's like, you know, when you're typing on a typewriter, there's that click of the keys.
Mhm.
And so, like, I think some digital organ manufacturers, they're actually including these sounds, the click of the key, to actually make the experience more authentic.
Absolutely, yeah. I also have sample sets here in my studio in Montreal. I have a digital organ with so a Hauptwerk set with I practice on a Cavaillé set and an organ in Waltershausen by Trost. You know, those are my favorite sets. You know, so and it has these key clicks, as you say.
Yes.
Mm.
And I wanted to ask you about what you thought about the international touring organ and Cameron Carpenter's
Mhm.
playing. You know, I think you mentioned to me that some of the students of McGill had had a chance to play that instrument when he came to Montreal.
Mhm. Cameron, I regard Cameron as a good friend. I admire him. He is an intellectual person. He is noir. He's a very dark person, very dark aesthetic, very dark philosophy of life.
Would you say cynical or just dark?
No, not cynical at all. No, I don't feel that. He's doing what he has to do. You know, he's very consistent with what he's doing. I mean, there are people that criticize him very strongly, and I also have problems with some of his interpretations. That's clear, you know, because we represent different worlds.
Yes.
But I respect him. I respect him for what he's doing. And
so in the same way that Leonard Bernstein said of Glenn Gould, you know, I don't agree with his interpretation, but and you know and you know what he's going to play has nothing to do with how I see the music being performed, but because I respect him as an artist, I'm allowing him to basically dictate to us how to play whatever he wants to play.
Yeah, and I mean, he had this digital organ built for him, you know. I mean, this is of course a lot of dollars involved, but he made this happen, and for this he is, I must say, chapeau, I take off my hat for him, because he has been consistent in what he's doing.
Yes.
Now, and he has also an angelic technique. I mean, he is just amazing what he can do with his 2 feet and 2 hands. I mean, we all have this, but what he is doing is beyond belief sometimes.
Right, like the thumbing down. And
I would wish that he would go a little bit keeping a momentum and keeping a bar length more easy to understand. My taste too much. But when I heard him last, he played a tango by Piazzolla, and of course in a tango you cannot screw up the pulse, huh? Because then it's not a tango anymore. Extremely convincing the way he did that.
Amazing. Well, you know, I think when we first met in Montreal, I think I mentioned to you that I was also interested in building an instrument for myself. And actually, I'm working with the same firm that he worked with, which is Marshall and Ogletree, to build an instrument.
Yeah.
For myself. But I'll tell you up front, it's not an organ. It's really. No. It's definitely inspired by organ building. You know, to most organists, it would have some resemblance of an organ in that it will have pedals, it'll have keys, but it will not, in every other way, it will not be an organ. Because for one, I want there to be 400 keys per manual, and the console is 360 degrees, so it's 5 manuals of 400 keys each. So so in that sense, it, you know, of course, it's inspired by organ building. It's inspired by the organ tradition. I even see it as a continuation of the organ tradition. But in other ways, it's totally not an organ. It's more of an electroacoustic instrument. It's you know, because it uses sampling, acoustic modeling, and of course, it's like kind of like a synthesizer in that, you know, it's using electrical currents to create sound. You know, so whereas what Cameron did with which is different than what Cameron did, because Cameron's instrument is a digital model or a digital replica of a dream organ, an imaginary organ that he had in his head. Whereas my instrument is, I'm not thinking in terms of this is an organ. I'm thinking much wider than that. I'm actually thinking of this instrument as a kind of library or archive of all the world's musical traditions. That's how I'm seeing the instrument.
When I did one of the largest projects I was the consultant for in the north of Sweden, we got to that question, you know, what should we do? Should we go? And the organ builder himself, he said, But if we add these digital possibilities, you know, we could have all percussion instruments that we want. And at that point, all of us said no. Everything should be able to be played mechanically. Mm-hmm. So metal plates, cymbals, bass drums, xylophones, vibraphones, everything is also real instruments.
Yes.
But you know, if you leave that and you go to do what you are doing, there are no limitations. And of course, you know, that's also very, very exciting. And the exciting thing is that an organ is not an organ is not an organ, you know. That's it.
Well, now you're gonna have the purists chasing after you, Hans.
I know, but that's fine. You know, I can give a good reply on most questions. You know.
And I think you love the name that I came up with for the instrument. I'm calling the instrument the Infinite Sonic Possibility Interface.
Oh wow, that's bordering on pretentiousness.
I know. It's almost like something out of a Douglas Adams book, you know, like or like you know, or something out of Star Wars or Star Trek, you know, where it's like the holograph machine can make anything you want, and you know you call it the Infinite Sonic Possibility Interface.
Sure.
And it's
you
almost
can hook it up to your brain cells also, you know, you don't even have to play it. You can lie there and think it, you know.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. And so I mean, of course, yeah, the name is definitely a little bit pretentious. Well, very pretentious, but I like to, I'm thinking of it as a conceptual instrument. You know, I'm thinking of it as even an idea. Like I want it to be not just the physical instrument. I want the idea of the instrument to have a life of its own, you know? The way that we think about sound. That because so in a sense, of course, the physical instrument matters because otherwise it's just an idea, and you know, ideas are not tangible sometimes. But I think that it's almost a challenge to myself, which is that of course nobody can be infinite, but I want to really I want to start out by saying that there are no limitations. So whatever limitations there are will be basically the limitations of the physical body and of the physical universe, you know, whatever those limitations are. But of course there's limitations, and the limitations of my technique, because this instrument is going to be unconquerable, you know, like no matter how much I play it, I'm not going to know it completely. And even though the relationship will be very intimate, after 50 years of playing this instrument, if I live that long, obviously I'll know it much better than the first 6 months that I played the instrument. But
invite me for the inauguration, okay?
Of course I will. And I'd be curious to see how you interact with it, and how, you know, and what kinds of sounds and things that, you know, you would come up with. So yeah, and that's the other thing. I want this instrument to be open to the public. You know, whether that's a 5-year-old child or whether that's an esteemed professor like yourself. I want it to be an accessible instrument. You know, because sometimes I find organs are behind closed doors. Like you have to really work to get to play an instrument, like, you know, and you've got to have the connections. So, you know, I want to try to make this instrument accessible.
Obviously, you know, there are also, especially with the historical instruments, there are of course considerations you have to make. You know, I always advise my students when it comes to experimental techniques to be very, very careful and always know what you're doing, so you're not destroying anything, you know.
Yes.
And because when I was 14, 15 and I played organs sometimes and I used a little bit more force than I actually needed, it became quite costly. So, you know, you really have to know what you're doing. So
yes, no, and that's exactly right. Like you wouldn't want a 10-year-old kid, you know, playing a cavaillé instrument and destroying the action, and then, you know, but you know, and I get that, and so it makes total sense to me that there are considerations, that there are boundaries, that they don't just let anybody play the instrument. But you know, like a piano, for example, like if there's a I don't know, a Fazioli piano in a concert hall, and you know, and let's say like a shitty upright piano in a bar, you know, obviously the you know, like there's a difference. Like if somebody's gonna play, you know, a crappy piano, then it's like fine, whoever wants to play it plays it. But if you're playing a Fazioli, then you know, if you destroy the Fazioli, that's a hell of a lot more expensive. And so like I get that there are considerations. You know, I'm not comparing organs to pianos, by the way, or Faziolis for that matter. But I get what you're saying. Like it does matter, especially if you can't replace the instrument. You know, if you can't, you know, if it's a historic console
and be very, very careful.
Yeah. So that makes sense. But I've been very lucky. I've been lucky that, you know, wherever I've gone, I've been given the opportunity to play these historic instruments, or instruments that generally other people are not sort of allowed to play freely. But I would say that one of the reasons that, for example, Cameron built the International Touring Organ is he said that, you know, the way that he played would actually destroy other instruments. So he wanted to make sure that when he built the International Touring Organ, when he slams down on the keys, obviously it doesn't affect the sound, but let's say he slams down on the keys, that it doesn't destroy the instrument.
Sure.
You know.
No, but Cameron is worthy of all respect. So, you know, I think he is a fascinating man, and I regard him as a friend, period.
Wow, well, this has been really interesting, and I think we covered a lot of ground.
So,
do you have anything else to add? Anything that we haven't talked about that you wanna?
There are a lot of things we haven't talked about, but you know, if you look what you have now, perhaps you can edit it together, because there was on your internet provider, and then we'll see.
All right. Yeah.
Okay, sounds great. Fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Good to talk to you.
Yeah, and good to talk to you as well, and I really appreciate your time.
Take care, and we'll be in touch.
Okay, bye.
All the best. Bye.